Born in adversity, Christianity survived in Rome under barbarian warlords and began to lay foundations that have endured and are recognized 1500 years later.
We have spoken of the breakdown of the Roman peace in the West in the 5th century, and Bede's regret about the barbarianism he describes in his history. We have heard many times, and shall hear many times more, how utterly important Christianity was in the lives of its adherents. For the vast majority of people, its promises were literally their only hope in the afterlife. Whatever we might think of the several Christian churches, their beliefs and moral trajectories in the period we're reviewing, I am certain that monks, priests and nuns, for the most part, did all they could within the concept of their compassion for the destitute, the sick and the dying, as many still do. If anything surprises me today about the Roman Church, it is that it seems to have stopped missionizing to its one-time core supporters, the millions of religiously lapsed Europeans whose culture is infused by Christianity. We have commented that a dark age of different intensities of shade descended on Western Europe in the 5th century, but not on the Byzantine Roman Empire in southeastern Europe and the Near East. Here, Christianity, law, culture flourished. The emperors were threatened from time to time by Attila and his Huns, by some incomer Avars who settled imperial Dacia, modern Romania, by a race known as Vandals, but they were dealt with. In the 7th century, less easy to deal with was the sudden emergence of a belligerent Islam from southern Arabia, whose rulers in Baghdad, the Abbasid dynasty, were inquisitive, enlightened, and encouraged learning. They put Greek and Roman knowledge to practical use in their building and medicine, and their scholars, many of them Christians, greatly developed mankind's understanding of philosophy and of the sciences by observation and experiment. I shall revert to this important matter later, for history is instructive, and I want to persuade those watching who need any persuading that other races and other cultures are as good as Western culture, sometimes better, and in the case of the Muslim empires have taught us much, though Western Europe was slow to pick up on it. These Islamic rulers were also devastatingly militarist. Popes in Rome had to accommodate new kings like Odoacer and Theodoric, whom we have met. They had to strike a mutually beneficial bargain with the Roman nobility, to duck and dive, to maintain and then to raise their game vis-à-vis kings and emperors, many of the earliest rulers being little more than warlords. It might not have been altogether unlike living under the Colombian boss of a Cali drug cartel, or a Taliban tribal chief in Afghanistan today. The Church was an unquestioningly civilizing force by the standards of the times, through its teaching, its use of writing, and its building. But on the sciences, on mathematics, on medicine, it was obscurantist for centuries, a traditional view now subject to revision by some historians such as James Henham, who reminds us that an Englishman, Thomas Bradwardine, briefly Archbishop of Canterbury in 1349, he died in the Black Death of that year, proved Aristotle wrong in one respect, realizing that mathematics was not separate from sciences, but essential to them. But by the 11th century, when our story will end, Muslim Baghdad, Cairo, Granada in southern Spain, and Greek Constantinople had built or rebuilt aqueducts, sewers, introduced fresh drinking water, were building ships up to 40 yards from prow to stern, and inevitably making better weapons. London, Paris, Rome survived in a slavish sloth of slime and filth because the church, which set social and educational standards, did not see that cleanliness was next to godliness. One of the 3 vows taken, even by the highest churchman, was that of poverty in this life, the implication surely being that this was in exchange for rich rewards in the next. We have touched on hermits who made a virtue of extreme poverty. Being dirty, covered in boils like Job, inspired a hair shirt mentality, even if some prelates and priests live lavishly. Clever men can square any circle. By the 10th century, the vast majority of Europeans lived under heartless military aristocracies that were supported by the church, and the subjection of the people to these men, they were all men, could only have been seen by the clerical community as part of God's plan. That would change in the later 10th and 11th centuries, as we shall discover. What mattered was not the physical conditions in which these masses lived and died, but that by these conditions they were made better prepared for the rewards of heaven promised by Christianity. We find this inconceivable. Even clergy of mainstream Christian denominations today would find this inconceivable. But that is the way the world was in our period. Suffering was the essence of faith, which began with Christ's passion and his resurrection. For the Church, suffering has no sharper focus than the crucifixion of the Son of God. Christianity had been founded upon the greatest martyr of them all, and the martyrdom of believers played a crucial role in the early centuries of the faith. So when the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, the Christian martyr all but disappeared. There were occasional martyrdoms where pagans took over from former Roman provinces, or churchmen went to pagan foreign parts and got put to death for their trouble. But on the whole, martyrdom was exceptional, save of course heretic Christian martyrs, a feature of Christianity as other religions, which reserve their most severe condemnation for deviants. The essential ingredient of suffering is mysticism, from the Greek via Latin mystikos, the initiation into sacred rites to open the door into the divine. Christian men and women died appalling deaths for public entertainment under persecuting Roman emperors like Diocletian. They gave their lives for what they believed was the greatest mystery of life, resurrection after death. Their self-sacrifice cannot surely have failed to impress increasing numbers of spectators. A religion whose followers willingly died for their belief must have had something going for it. When official persecution ended in the Roman Empire, martyrdom had to be replaced somehow. This was perhaps unwittingly begun in the West by St. Benedict of Nursia, who lived between 480 and 550, and he is the patriarch of Western monasticism. Benedict began his religious life as a hermit at Subiaco, Italy, and he founded the monastery there and at Monte Cassino north of Naples, bombed to smithereens, unnecessarily as it turned out, by the Allies in 1944. The Benedictine Rule forms the base of all rules of subsequent orders of monks. It included authority, stability, obedience and communal work, chastity and poverty being added later. Prayer and manual work were the practical focuses, often depicted in later frescoes as holding a rod for corporal punishment. St. Benedict also said that an abbot should be flexible and a spiritual father to his community. Though treated with much suspicion in the Catholic and several Orthodox churches, physical suffering has played a central role from the stigmata to self-flagellation, or even mutual consensual discipline from Orthodox Russia to Catholic Spain, where there were, by the 16th century, flourishing groups of disciplinarians. Every Easter in the Philippines, men, mostly, process in large numbers in remembrance of Christ's passion, whipping themselves till blood flows. Other mainstream religions such as Islam and Hinduism also have such strands. The hair shirt was, for all I know, remains for some religious an essential garment in atonement. The times that one reads in chronicles of St. Peter or an angel scourging a reluctant future saint are several. A scourge was no mere whip, but a whip whose flails were tipped with pieces of metal or bone that cut into the skin and muscle. In the first half of the 5th century, a hermit, later a saint, Simeon Stylites, spent 37 years atop a pillar, a stylite, at Tel Anissos, modern Deir Seman in Syria, naked, exposed to the elements, praying and prostrating himself. As a younger man, he had wrapped twisted palm frond rope round his body, which shrank as it dried, cutting deeply into his flesh, and he nearly died. His abbot dismissed him. Later he had himself chained to a rock on top of a mountain and had to be persuaded by the Patriarch of Antioch to come down. No wonder that the Old Testament book of Job was one of the most studied and written about texts in Christianity, for Job rejected the traditional view that suffering could be attributed to sin, but was also inflicted on the innocent like him. Job was unable to resolve this problem, as has the Church. This is little wonder, since the purest, most innocent sufferer, hyperbole is indicated here, was of course the Son of God. The only explanation that there could be for suffering without any human reason was that it was ineffable. It was divine. The innocent always suffer. We in the still liberal West should beware of politicians in charge of national security who tell us the innocent have nothing to fear. I have heard it in recent years from British Home Secretaries. The first man to coin this phrase, so far as I know, was Felix Dzerzhinsky, who founded Lenin's secret police, the Cheka, later and better known as the KGB. He was a Polish Jew. Monasticism originated in Egypt in the 4th century, among men who are called the Desert Fathers. Best known is St. Antony of Egypt, who died in 356, but the earliest known founder of community monasticism was St. Pachomius, an Egyptian who died 10 years earlier. St. Cassian was from Romania, then part of the Roman Empire, who went to Italy and then France sometime after 400, where he founded 2 monasteries. The claim to be the oldest monastery is that of St. Catherine's in Sinai, modern Egypt. She is supposed to have lived in the 4th century and been put to death on a wheel, being finally beheaded. A firework called the Catherine Wheel is named after her. In fact, no early martyrology has survived of her, and her cult was fostered by the monks of the Sinai monastery from the 9th century. This story tells that her body, after execution, was carried by angels, or possibly monks, to the monastery where it was buried. She became very popular in Western Europe, especially in England in the Middle Ages, and is the subject of several Renaissance masterpieces. Most important for Roman monasticism were St. Antony, some of whose letters survive, and Cassian, who wrote institutes or rules which had great influence on St. Benedict, whose rule, as noted, underpins monastic regulations in the Catholic Church. All of these matters bear on the islands at the edge of the world, when English evangelists led the vanguard of Roman Orthodox renewal in the 8th century.
The father of theology was St. Augustine of Hippo, who expounded the Catholic world's idea of original sin. We will meet him in the next episode.